True science fiction is not about spaceships or impossible technology. It is the most philosophical, existential, and visionary genre in cinema. This is not a top 10 list of trivia. These are the 10 best films in the history of the genre. Masterpieces that revolutionized the medium and anticipated our present by decades. From the film that predicted the Chernobyl disaster with millimeter precision, sealing the death of its own director, to the one I consider the greatest film of all time. Not of the genre, but in the history of cinema. Get ready. You are not only about to see the pinnacle of art, you are about to discover how our present day was already written nearly a century ago. Gattaca places us on the eve of a cold, clinical, and terrifyingly close tomorrow. This dystopia introduces us to a world where the genetic lottery has been eradicated. Parents no longer conceive out of love, but in laboratories, designing made-to-order children to give birth to the valids. Those conceived naturally are the invalids, pariahs condemned to clean the floors of the elites. The plot follows Vincent, a common man who defies the system by impersonating a genetically perfect specimen to fulfill his dream of traveling into space. Andrew Niccol delivers flawless direction, with a retro-futuristic aesthetic of clean lines and golden tones that evokes a false utopia. The film does not need major digital effects. Its tension lies in the gaze, in the constant fear of being discovered through a single drop of blood or an eyelash forgotten in the wrong place. It is the triumph of the human spirit over data. The analogy with our present is chilling. In 1997, CRISPR and gene editing seemed like distant science fiction. Today, in the middle of 2026, we are on the doorstep of that very same social segmentation. We are no longer measured just by our DNA, but by our digital footprint, algorithmic bias, and the relentless optimization of productivity. Gattaca predicted that technology would not free us from prejudice, but would rather give it a scientific basis to justify it. A perfect work that reminds us that there is no gene for the human spirit. Imagine a world without the cry of a baby. A planet where humanity has discovered its expiration date not because of a nuclear war or an asteroid, but due to global infertility. In 2006, Alfonso Cuarón gave birth to one of the most visceral and suffocating portraits of science fiction, Children of Men. The story takes us to a grey and worn-out tomorrow, where the youngest inhabitant on Earth has just died at the age of 18. Society, plunged into chaos and apathy due to the lack of a future, survives amidst suffocating bureaucracy and a survival of the fittest mentality. In the middle of this bleak landscape, Theo, a disillusioned man consumed by cynicism, is forced to protect Key, a young immigrant who holds the most valuable secret on the planet. She is pregnant. Thus begins an odyssey against the clock to safeguard the last hope of our species. Cuarón delivers masterful direction, famous for its virtuous sequence shots of up to 6 minutes that throw the viewer into the mud, the bullets, and the desperation of the characters. There is no Hollywood heroism. There is a camera acting as a direct and uncomfortable witness to survival. The accuracy of Children of Men regarding our current reality is staggering. 2 decades after its release, the global demographic crisis, population aging, declining fertility, and institutional isolation are no longer a screenwriter's hypothesis, but daily press headlines. There are works that change cinema, and then there is Akira. In 1988, Katsuhiro Otomo blew up world animation by hand-drawing more than 160,000 frames to bring Neo-Tokyo to life. A megalopolis of neon and asphalt built on the ashes of a nuclear explosion. In this hornet's nest, Kaneda and Tetsuo, 2 orphaned and marginalized bikers, crash head-on into a military experiment. When Tetsuo awakens an uncontrollable psychic power, the film mutates into a biological and apocalyptic nightmare. Akira functions as a heartbreaking philosophical essay on repressed trauma, youth alienation, and the danger of reaching an evolution for which mankind is not yet mature. But its prophetic accuracy is baffling. Not only did it nail that Tokyo would host the Olympic Games in the year 2020 in the middle of a crisis, its panels even showed a sign with the graffiti, "Cancel it," a phrase repeated identically in the real protests. That Neo-Tokyo is the exact reflection of our digital era. Societies doped up on technology, but empty of purpose, and the constant fear of a power, today embodied by artificial intelligence, that advances faster than our ethics. Otomo predicted that the true danger does not lie in machines, but in human arrogance when attempting to control forces that escape our own understanding. In space, no one can hear you scream. With that premise, Ridley Scott transformed science fiction into a gothic nightmare. Alien follows the crew of the Nostromo, a commercial freighter that makes the mistake of responding to a mysterious signal on a desolate moon. What seemed like a routine mission turns into a claustrophobic slaughter when a perfect life form begins to hunt them down, one by one, in the bowels of the ship. Alien fuses horror and science fiction to confront us with one of the most primitive human emotions, the fear of the unknown. The xenomorph is a perfect biological force, a creature designed solely to survive. Each of its appearances turns the screen into an exercise in unbearable tension. And the true omen of Alien is not the monster, but the company. That invisible corporation that gives a direct order to the ship's artificial intelligence: ensure specimen, crew expendable. Today, in a reality where tech megacorporations prioritize profit and the training of their algorithms over human well-being, the Nostromo is no longer science fiction. Scott predicted modern dehumanization, a tomorrow where we are not explorers of the cosmos, but simple disposable labor for the interests of a board of shareholders. Look around you. The screens that surround you, the notifications that dictate your mood, the perfect routine you accept as reality. The Matrix follows the awakening of Neo, a programmer trapped in an existential tedium who discovers that the world he inhabits is a sophisticated digital simulacrum, a mental prison designed by hyper-intelligent machines to harvest the energy of a sedated humanity. The cultural impact of the film was a cataclysm. Visually, it redefined the language of action cinema by combining the aesthetics of anime, comic books, and Eastern martial arts under a green patina of binary code, immortalizing revolutionary effects like bullet time. But beneath the leather trench coats and impossible choreographies beats a treatise on pure philosophy. They mixed the allegories of Plato's cave and Jean Baudrillard's simulacrum into a pop commercial package, questioning what is real when artificial stimuli are indistinguishable from actual experience. Today, the dystopia of the machines no longer feels like a late-century fantasy. We are not plugged into cubicles with cables in the back of our necks, but we live voluntarily submerged in an invisible matrix governed by the retention algorithm. Social networks, hyper-realistic virtual environments, and personalized feeds have built echo chambers that shape our daily perception. The Wachowskis masterfully predicted the confinement of modern consciousness, a world where truth matters less than the comfort of the simulacrum, reminding us that the most dangerous alienation is the one we accept with a smile. If you are enjoying this journey through the prophecies of cinema, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to become part of this refuge. Stalker is the reason science fiction exists. In this film, the genre is merely a pretext to strip us bare and talk about faith, consciousness, and the emptiness of the human soul. But the true myth of this masterpiece lies in its cursed aura. Its filming carried an invisible death sentence that ultimately cost the lives of its protagonist, the director's wife, and Andrei Tarkovsky himself. The film takes us into the Zone, a hostile territory cordoned off by the military, and filled with lethal anomalies after the mysterious impact of a meteorite. In this post-apocalyptic landscape, a clandestine guide, the Stalker, leads a skeptical writer and a melancholic scientist toward the Room, a sacred place that grants the deepest desires of a human being. What is bone-chilling is that 7 years before the Chernobyl reactor exploded in 1986, Tarkovsky predicted in an almost mystical way the concept of a radioactive exclusion zone abandoned by civilization and reclaimed by wild nature. The film is an hypnotic experience, but its filming was a descent into hell. After a year of shooting, a laboratory error destroyed almost all of the original celluloid SCI-FI, forcing Tarkovsky to remake the film from scratch without a budget and with the crew on the brink of psychological collapse. The director transformed that disaster into a visual miracle of infinite sequence shots. What no one imagined was that the chosen locations, hydroelectric plants and industrial areas in Estonia, were a lethal chemical trap. Years later, a large part of the crew, including actor Anatoly Solonitsyn, the filmmaker's wife, and Tarkovsky himself passed away from lung cancer due to toxic exposure. The director sacrificed his own life to leave us the definitive testament of spiritual dystopia. Nearly a century before digital effects invaded screens, Fritz Lang had already built the definitive dystopia using colossal models, thousands of extras, and revolutionary optical effects. Metropolis is the mold from which Blade Runner, Star Wars, and practically the entire modern genre were born. The story submerges us into a megalopolis of the year 2026, fractured into two vertical and irreconcilable worlds. On the surface, the intellectual elites enjoy idyllic gardens and majestic skyscrapers. In the underground, the masses operate as human cogs of the Moloch machine, an industrial heart that devours their lives to maintain the luxuries of the apex. The technical deployment of this peak work of German expressionism was a pharaonic madness that almost bankrupted the production company UFA. Lang filmed a millimetric and suffocating mass choreography, where the bodies of the workers move with the automated rigidity of the machines themselves. Visually, the film immortalized iconic images that form part of universal history, such as the creation of the robotic woman, who personifies the deconstruction and danger of technology used to manipulate the masses. What is disturbing is that Lang set this dystopia in this very year, 2026. His visionary character allowed him to create that robotic clone used to manipulate the masses. The direct ancestor of deepfakes and generative AI that polarize our reality today. When 2001 was released, Andrei Tarkovsky felt the need to film the Soviet response, and that was Solaris. Kubrick's work seemed to him a monument too cold and technological, so he decided to shift the genre to the terrain of love. Not as a passing feeling, but as an eternal ontological force that defines our existence. Tarkovsky makes us wait 40 minutes on Earth, with infinite shots of water and gazes, so that upon ascending into space, we understand that we are not going to see science fiction, but the soul confronting technology. The plot moves us to a decaying space station, orbiting a mysterious living and conscious ocean. Traveling there is Chris Kelvin, a psychologist sent to investigate the mental crisis of the crew. What Kelvin ignores is that Solaris materializes one's deepest regrets. Upon waking, he finds himself face to face with Hari, his wife, who had committed suicide years earlier on Earth. But Hari is not a ghost or a hologram. She is real. The ocean embodies the indissoluble bond that unites them, proving that she forms part of Kelvin's very substance. By returning his wife to him in body and soul, the film becomes a merciless mirror of our inability to live with pain. Today, Solaris generates a painful echo. While we obsess over expanding technique, the film warns us of emotional isolation, a tomorrow where we can cross the universe while being unable to look inside ourselves. A crowning work that reminds us that we do not need to conquer the cosmos. We only need to learn, once and for all, to love. What makes us human? Our memories, our empathy, or simply the fear of dying? Ridley Scott sculpted the great ethical dilemma of the 21st century. In a dystopian Los Angeles, suffocated by pollution and materialism, Rick Deckard is an agent specialized in hunting and retiring replicants. Biological androids identical to human beings, created as slave labor in outer space colonies, who have rebelled after developing emotions of their own. The conflict erupts when a group of these Nexus 6, led by the magnetic Roy Batty, returns to Earth not to conquer the planet, but to demand that their creator extend their short 4-year lifespans. The true mental journey of the film is the subversion of empathy. While Deckard becomes dehumanized with each execution, crawling like a nihilistic bureaucrat through streets, suffocated by neon and garbage, the replicants bleed, cry, and cling to existence with a fierce passion. Scott, enveloped in the synthesizer notes of Vangelis, destroys the barrier between the artificial and the organic. Roy Batty and his kind are not monsters. They are prodigal sons desperately searching for time to process the miracle of being alive. That leaves us with impossible existential questions. Do they have consciousness, or do they simply fake it in an ultra-precise way? Can the soul emerge from a machine? A colossal dilemma that rests upon a handcrafted miracle. Scott built this future by hand, with colossal models, real rain, and optical tricks that provide the film with a dirty, organic, and heavy texture. A film so perfect that, rather than talking about the future, it forces us to look at our hands and wonder if we, those of flesh and blood, the ones who have a soul, are still truly alive. In 1968, Stanley Kubrick proved that you can film God. Placing 2001 at the top is not a cinephile cliché. It is accepting an incontestable reality. It is not the best science fiction film in history. It is the crowning work of the seventh art. Kubrick did not design mass entertainment. He sculpted an evolutionary leap for human consciousness using celluloid as a metaphysical tool. From the most famous editing cut in cinema, where a prehistoric bone transforms into a space station, the film launches us into a journey that devours time. The plot becomes a philosophical labyrinth when the definitive AI, HAL 9000, sabotages the mission to Jupiter after suffering a deeply human nervous breakdown, forcing astronaut Dave Bowman to cross the threshold of the infinite to transform into something superior. Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke eliminated the narrative conventions of Hollywood. The film begins with 3 minutes of a disturbing requiem in absolute darkness. There are no explanatory dialogues, there is no complacent rhythm, there are minutes of absolute cosmic silence that transmit the true dread of the universe. Visually, it is an insuperable feat. Filmed before man stepped on the moon, its scientific realism and its practical handcrafted effects possess a sharpness and a physical scale that current effects can never replicate. Its technical farsightedness was almost miraculous, anticipating orbital space stations, digital tablets, video calls, and, above all, the implacable autonomy of artificial intelligence. In fact, the visual realism that Kubrick achieved was so disturbingly perfect that it fueled for decades one of the greatest myths in history. The conspiracy theory that the Apollo 11 moon landing was a rehearsed fake, and that the US government hired him to shoot the fraudulent voyage to the moon. 2001 is the definitive answer to why we love cinema. Dave Bowman's journey to Jupiter does not seek aliens, it seeks the origin of consciousness. Kubrick used outer space to look out at the mystery of our own evolution, giving us a crowning work that has not aged a single day. An imperturbable monolith that reminds us that human technique is insignificant if we forget to look toward the infinite. If you like this journey, do not forget to like and subscribe to become part of this refuge. Now it is your turn. Let me know in the comments what masterpieces I have forgotten. Thank you for taking care of your soul. See you very soon.